Hello there, welcome to this week's 5y5. This is a show, a podcast and a YouTube video all about 5 yards, where George Ellick and myself, Ali Maxwell, 5 yards ambassadors, talk about 5 interesting players in the prism of the 5 yards game with the help of special guests. We've got someone on today who knows plenty about Liverpool FC. George, how are you getting on? How are you enjoying all of the Champions League, Premier League, EFL, European action, keeping your head above water?
Not really. It's just so relentless. Can't really stop for breath, but I feel like I say this every week. And I'm sure as soon as we have a couple of days rest in the summer, I'll be absolutely gagging for the Euros. But, 5 yards makes it all that little bit more exciting, because I do find myself in the week counting down to Tuesday, counting down to Friday, and plenty of action again this Tuesday transfer window, wasn't there?
Yeah, I got roped into a buy of Vinicius Jr. Of Real Madrid by my friend Sam Ty. Sam's been getting heavily involved in the 5 yards transfer market. And I mean, I don't know everyone who's playing at the moment, but I do know Sam, and I do know that he's doing pretty well so far, especially with Donyell Marlon, who he spoke to us about on this very show about a month or so ago. So he managed to sell Vinicius Jr. as a buy to me, and that was my action on the Tuesday, or during the Tuesday transfer window. Just looking at the trades, someone bought 100% of Memphis Depay just before the window closed at 48 million. That is a heavy investment, clearly looking for, I suppose, a big move in the summer. As always, Ivan Toney, someone bought a good chunk of him. Donyell Marlon, another player who's been so popular over the last, 2 months now. 54% of Rafael Guerreiro. Love to see that. Really, what a nice player he is who plays for Dortmund. 4 separate people buying into Phil Foden. No surprise there. As for sells, my heart was broken when I saw someone sold 100% of Ebere Eze. Once you get off the Eze train, we don't let you back on. So that's it.
On. Absolutely.
And someone sold 100% of Patson Daka as well, which I'm pretty surprised at based on your chat with Ben on this very show last week, or 2 weeks ago, I think it was. Let's get into today's episode, though. We've got our special guest. He's about to replace me and talk us through some prodigious talents at Liverpool Football Club.
Yeah, so as ever on 5 yards 5, we like to get in a guest to help talk us through one of their favourite players. And we speak to them about one of the players we want to talk about as well. And I'm delighted to be joined by freelance football writer Andrew Beasley. And Andrew, fair to say, you do a fair bit of writing. What percentage of it would you say is about your beloved Liverpool?
Probably about 95% of it, which for the last couple of years has been great, but for the last couple of months has obviously been a little bit more depressing. But obviously cover Liverpool in detail on a regular basis. So perhaps we'll talk about a couple of their players today.
Yeah, we're going to. I said over email, I said, if you want, you can choose a non-Liverpool player. You were like, I might do. And then this morning it was like, no, I've chosen a Liverpool lad. And it's a guy that we've actually spoken about without any level of expertise I think a couple of months ago in the infancy of this programme. So I'm intrigued to know more about him. But we'll get on to that, because firstly, I just want to ask you, we're recording this at a time where Liverpool are in terrible form, it's fair to say, in the Premier League, who were beaten at Anfield by Everton, something I think you and I, despite us being young pups, never expected to see in our lifetimes. And hopefully it'll never happen for your sake in a full Anfield. What do you make of Liverpool at the moment, especially given the good performance in Europe that should see you through to the next round there, given the addition of Thiago, and whenever I seem to watch Liverpool, he looks to me still as being one of the standout players. What do you make of this run of form?
Yes, it's hard to know what to make of it, really. I think you can't ignore just the level of the injuries is just sort of decimating the team, really. It's not as if they're not having any decent chances in these matches that they're losing, but they're just too easy to score against. The opposition don't need many chances to get a goal against them. And that's understandable in a way. Obviously, the 3 main centre-backs are out for the season, and they're on their 18th centre-back partnership, I think it is. They've used 3 different goalkeepers, so there's just no sort of understanding or long-term relationships there, and it's sort of costing them at the back. As I say, they're still having chances going forward, but they're not taking enough of them. And I think teams have obviously worked out that if they come to Anfield and basically park the bus, to use the cliche, they should be able to keep Liverpool out and they'll still have chances of their own. Liverpool have been doing okay away from home, apart from the recent Leicester game. They've beaten Tottenham, West Ham, Leipzig. So they probably get a bit more space to play in away from home, and it allows them to play as they want to. But it's hard to see how they're going to solve this issue for the home games, because I'm sure teams are just going to come and do the same thing again, and it's up to Liverpool to sort of break them down, and it's something they're struggling with.
It is. I mean, in my mind, the player that we're going to talk about, and I can now reveal that it is Curtis Jones, has been not only one of the shining lights for Liverpool this season in what has been a difficult campaign and a struggle in terms of a Premier League defence, but he also strikes me as a player whose skill set should be fairly good at breaking down low blocks, who should be fairly good at preventing the kind of issues that Liverpool are really facing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of his game is progressing the ball up the pitch. He's excellent at that. He's only a couple of players in the Premier League have completed more progressive carries per 90 than he has this season. Bernardo Silva and your mate Jack Grealish are the only two who are ahead of Jones. And I think that's something that, again, perhaps works better away from home, where they have more space for him to run into, which they don't have so much at Anfield. We saw recently the West Ham game I mentioned. He came on, and within about a minute he'd sort of charged forward through their midfield and played it into Salah, who then opened the scoring, and he picked up an assist. So his skills are like a lot of Liverpool's players, I think, are perhaps better served away from home at the moment. Yeah, but no, I mean, I think he's had a good season. You know, there aren't probably going to be many Liverpool players who remember this season particularly fondly, you would think, from the way it's going. But obviously, the injuries that they've had have given Jones more opportunities to play than he would have presumably got had everyone been fit.
He's up on 5 yards at the moment at 53 million. Unsurprisingly, that's gone up a lot in the last 9 or 10 months. If you go back to July the 1st, when the 5 yards pricing was very much a private thing, he was down at 30 million. So he's nearly doubled in value in that time, which I guess echoes how much his stature within the game has grown. And we've seen a few scout reports who are all fairly glowing of what he's doing. But crucially, I mean, with 5 yards, when you're buying a player, you are in effect buying hopefully, crucially, wins in their career, but also goals and assists. They are the two main ways that you're going to make money using 5 yards. And I guess, whilst he has picked up a fair bit of PP this season, in the Premier League he's got 1 assist, in the Champions League he's got 2 assists and a goal. Do you reckon as he spends more time in this team, as he grows as a player, we'll see him start to get those goal outputs that go alongside, the promising displays?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at his underlying expected goal and expected assist statistics on FBref.com, the StatsBomb data that they have, they've got him in the 89th percentile for XG and XA per 90 amongst midfielders in the Big Five leagues. So he's perhaps doing a bit more than the actual output would suggest at this point. But obviously, hopefully he will sort of continue to develop. He should do. Obviously, he's only 20. And put some actual goals and assists a bit more on the board next season. I think it seems likely that Gini Wijnaldum's going to leave because he hasn't signed a new contract. So that should ensure Jones plays plenty next season. He's already got the same number of goal contributions as Naby Keita has for Liverpool, albeit some of them are in the domestic cups. As you said, he hasn't got too many in the main two competitions yet. But he's sort of showing glimpses of what he can do, and he should obviously get better as he matures, but he should continue to play quite a lot.
Where do you think his best position would be, especially in the current formation that Liverpool that they will continue to play under Jurgen Klopp?
Obviously, I think as one of the two sort of, I suppose you'd call them eights, Liverpool's 4-3-3 with a defensive midfielder and then 2 in front of them. Obviously playing as one of those. But I think as long as he's in the team, then he should be able to contribute.
Yeah, I mean, he's still very, very young indeed, just 20 years old. And, we're seeing... It's a difficult time, I think, for young players to break into the England setup because there are so many of them trying to do so. But in your opinion, how good could he be in 3, 4, 5 years? Where do you think Curtis Jones will sit in kind of the footballing hierarchy? It is.
It's a bit of a big question, isn't it? As you say, there's a lot of, certainly in England, there's a lot of competition. I was looking earlier. I saw that there's only 7 players aged under 21 who've had more minutes starting in central midfield in one of the big leagues this season. None of them are from the Premier League. So I mean, if that's any kind of indication, that suggests that he should have a very good career. Quite how he'll fare against sort of his England contemporaries, as you say, he's a little bit behind them at the moment, I guess. But then he's probably the youngest. So I think he should be able to have a good career with Liverpool, certainly. And I guess beyond that,
well, let's talk about another Liverpool player who I want to discuss with you. And my bag, your bag is Liverpool, my bag is the EFL, and we're going to combine the two by talking about Harvey Elliott, who is having an excellent campaign at Blackburn Rovers. Fair to say that in recent times, probably both Blackburn and Harvey Elliott's form has somewhat dipped, but that takes nothing away from what this guy is doing, age 17, in his first season playing men's football. And I certainly was complacent as to how good he is. I think I hadn't seen him do much really, apart from a couple of clips before he went to Blackburn. But not only is he an incredibly good ball carrier and a great dribbler and very, very strong physically, his technical ability is something that we don't often see from wide players, and his confidence on the ball means that he is so dangerous anywhere on the pitch. And we often see him getting the ball on the right hand channel for Blackburn and looking up and seeing the defence sitting off, and rather than driving at them, he'll surprise them by playing these incredible switch balls across the pitch to the left-hand side. And it's not very often you see wingers doing that anyway, let alone 17-year-olds stepping up for the first time. We mentioned that Curtis Jones is 53 million on 5 yards. Harvey Elliott is 49 million. He's 3 years younger. So that would suggest probably that the guys are expecting Curtis Jones, well, from now at least, Curtis Jones to basically make more PP than Harvey Elliott going forward. But from what I'm seeing, and I'm a massive Jones fan, from what I'm seeing this season, normally I think when Premier League players get loaned out, it can spell something of the end of their time at that club. Especially recently, we rarely see managers at a top club send out players on loan that they're expecting to recall. But that can't be the case with Elliott. Surely Liverpool fans are still expecting Elliott sometime soon to start breaking into the first team.
Yeah, I would think so. I'd be surprised if he didn't. Quite what the plan will be for next season remains to be seen. But I would certainly expect if he's at Liverpool, then he'll be playing all the domestic cup games and perhaps some of the slightly easier league fixtures next season. As you say, I mean, I think he's probably got a higher ceiling than Jones eventually. Obviously, as I'm sure you know, and probably all the listeners and viewers, he's joint top of the Championship for assists at this point. And he is getting far more minutes than anybody else of his age at that level this season. So he's doing a lot right. I don't watch him or the Championship as much as you, but I mean, from the clips I've seen, most of his assists as well, they're not just sort of the assists that some players pick up by just passing the ball and then the goal scorer does all the work. He's had some excellent assists in amongst all of those. He's definitely one for the future. I mean, I doubt he'd be a first team regular for Liverpool next season, but I think it's unlikely Liverpool are going to be splashing loads of cash in the summer, and he is somebody who could come back and certainly become a squad player next season.
The difficulty must be for him is that in his position that he wants to play, there's a certain Mo Salah who's kind of made that position his own. I mean, is that a difficulty here? Is that that front three? When you get Jota back in the mix, when he's fit again, it'll be the forward again competing for those 3 places. It's going to be pretty hard for a right winger to muscle in, because there's nowhere else he could play in that team at all. He couldn't play in the 3, he probably couldn't play on the left-hand side either.
No. I suppose one thing that might work in his favour is that as much as we all love him, Roberto Firmino is now looking like he's had a couple of quiet years on the goal-scoring front. He obviously brings way more than that to the team, but ultimately he hasn't scored many goals in the last couple of seasons. And Salah has played centrally for Liverpool in the past and has a very good record when he has done so. So it's not unreasonable that maybe Salah plays centrally a bit more often, which would then potentially open a slot for for Elliott. But I mean, that's probably not going to be every week, obviously, as we say. But it's one way in that, the competition from Salah couldn't maybe not go against him too badly.
Two players in Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, where if they go on to be regulars for both Liverpool and England at 53 million and 49 million, there must be a bit of value there. And Curtis Jones, a player who isn't that far away from already being a regular for Liverpool or a first team choice. So plenty to get your teeth into there. Hopefully this, speaking about two players in the Liverpool books, we'll get some Liverpool fans over here. Do check out 5 Yards, plenty of other players in there as well. And if you agree or disagree with what we've said about either player, do scout them both. But thanks very much to you, Andrew. Thanks for joining about either player. Do scout them both. But thanks very much to you, Andrew. Thanks for joining us today. And please join us again on the 5x5 soon. Yeah, it's not just the Premier League and the EFL that has us watching the games at the moment. There is plenty of Champions League action in midweek. The Champions League is back. And after Tuesday night's games, there is only one name on everybody's lips. English bred, but not English player at Bayern Munich, 17-year-old, who scored his first Champions League goal midweek at Lazio. Ali, tell us all about him.
Yeah, Musiala is the man, I suppose the boy, still legally on everyone's lips after his performance, his goal in the Champions League knockout game. The youngest ever English goalscorer in a Champions League game, which was a record that I guess lasted only about 12 hours, because as of Wednesday morning, he officially declared for Germany. And presumably, George, I don't know who actually owns the record books. It's kind of
Guinness.
But yeah, we need to get on to Guinness, because presumably he's now expunged from that record and it goes back to being Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, because I don't think the record books have a great deal of time for dual nationality. And it's going to keep causing them problems like this, because Musiala now will be representing Germany and I guess in the football record books' eyes will not be an English player anymore. But yeah, you're right. Born in Germany, bred in England, Chelsea Academy, then Bayern Munich Academy, and now scoring for them in the knockout stages. And 5 Yards is so many things. You guys know that a couple of weeks ago I justified a short-term buy of Robert Lewandowski, basically entirely to do with Champions League performance pay. That started well, didn't it? On Tuesday night, he got a goal, he got a win, he got 1.3 million in performance pay. A good start. I wanted 10 PP returns in the Champions League between now and the end of the season. He's already got me 2. So that was a good start. But more so than that, I think 5 Yards is about being there at the very start of the careers of those who are going to be the elite players. Mbappe, just over 200 million on the platform. Haaland, 135 million on the platform. What we want now is to work out who the next ones of those are, and we want to be on them early. So Musiala we have to talk about on this show. It is a responsibility of ours. He is 77 million on 5 Yards at the moment. It's obviously a pretty high price. I do like the fact that last night, with a goal and a win in a game in which he started, he made 1.3 million in performance pay. That's 1.7% of his total value earned in just one night. So anyone who got in early on Musiala will be feeling pretty chuffed with themselves this morning. Someone so young with so much football ahead of him, already playing for, if not the best team in the world, certainly one of the top 3 and favourites for this year's Champions League. What do we know about him as a player? Well, he's played around 400 minutes in the Bundesliga this season, 2 starts and a number of substitute appearances. In games for Bayern's second team, I think playing in the third tier of German football, it was a classic case of a player aged 16 looking like a player who'd played 500 games at the level before, clearly head and shoulders above on a technical level, but even holding his own at a physical level at that age. And it's those things that added together make him such an exciting player. I guess one of the top line things on Musiala is, and he's not the only person of his age group who stands out in this sense, is just ball carrying ability, is such an innate understanding of when to carry the ball, but when to move the ball as well. And when he does decide to carry the ball, the agility, the balance that he shows in that dribbling ability, it's very, very hard to take the ball off him. And if you watch his highlights on YouTube, you will leave with the impression that anyone who dives in when Jamal Musiala has the ball should instantly be subbed off, because that should be a prerequisite. You do not dive in on Musiala, because he will jink past you. and your defenders behind you will not thank you. But it's not just about beating a man. I think what's clear is he's got a maturity about his game. You know, we talk about Bellingham in this sense as well. Just a really good concept of the team, of when to... You know, he comes looking for the ball a lot. He's not someone that necessarily wants to run in behind. He's not someone that stays out on the flank and waits for the ball to get to him. He'll come inside. He's very happy and clearly wants to get involved in spells of possession, take a touch, keep the ball moving, and that stands out quite well. I think we've spoken about Emil Smith-Rowe recently as having this sort of skill, and I think these are the sorts of things that might not be quite as exciting and maybe don't end up on those YouTube highlights reels, but I think those who really scout the game at the very top level, that'll be a huge tick in the box for a player at just 17 to be doing this. I think physically, he's clearly quite tall for his age. He is, for obvious reasons, at the age of 17, not the strongest in terms of upper body. But I think one of the things that will excite Bayern fans and the hierarchy at Bayern more than anything is how much will he fill out. You know, at the very extreme level, someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, built not dissimilarly to him at his age, you'd say, and who could have predicted the extent to which he filled out physically? You know, he is the 0.1%. He is the creme de la creme. So where will Musiala get to that point physically, and what will that add to his game over the coming years? I think at 77 million, you really want to know a lot about Musiala, and you really need to be clear as to what the next few years will look like for him. He's clearly an incredible talent. It looks like, in terms of playing for Germany, he might well get fast-tracked into their first team. There is a potential career for him if he is good enough, and this is where I'm not 100% sure just yet, if he is good enough to play for Bayern Munich and Germany at the very top of the game, earning a ton of PP through wins and goals and assists for 10 years. That would take him to 27, right? So that is the really exciting thing if you're thinking about getting involved with Musiala. Having said that, it would be remiss not to mention that he only really started last night in the Champions League because of huge injuries to Bayern. I think they only had really 11 fit senior players. They couldn't even fill their bench. So I don't think this would be a buy, expecting him to rack up a ton of PP in the Champions League between now and the end of the season. And maybe next season, he's still got Coman, he's still got Sane, he's still got... there's another winger that I can't even think of. He's got Muller as well in a similar sort of position to compete with. So maybe not one to expect just to absolutely kick off from here. But he's got so much time, doesn't he? So this is the big question, really. Do you think this player will become a starter for Bayern Munich? Because if so... if that's going to be the case, age 18 or 19, 77 million could look very cheap very quickly, and his price will probably rise if that becomes clear. So if you want to get it in front of that, then Musiala's got to be pretty exciting. But it is definitely just a hold for me at the moment. I'm not clear enough on his pathway, on exactly, you know, whether Bayern will get carried away enough to really chuck him in, because they can sign elite players. They can have the very best players in the world in their team, and Musiala might not be there quite yet. But really, really exciting stuff in midweek in the Champions League.
Well, it's interesting
George,
hearing you talk about
talk
Musiala as being 77 million, age 17, because the player I'm going to talk about is yet to play in Champions League. He is a left winger. He's 23 years of age, so 6 years older than Musiala, but he's £29 million cheaper, and that's Harvey Barnes, who's 48 million. Now, I am a fan of Barnes. I have been ever since he graced us in the Championship in the loan spell with West Brom. But in terms of first and foremost, let's talk about him, I guess, because Harvey Barnes is basically the player that all England fans were desperate for during the golden age of the late 90s, early 90s. You know, he's a natural left-sided player who comes inside and scores goals, who can get around defences, who can provide assist and score, who's direct, who is energetic. He's basically the player that England struggled to create for so long, but now his route to the first team in England is blocked by the fact that there are suddenly an absolute plethora of players who would like to come inside off the left-hand side consistently. You know, he's competing against, whether it's Marcus Rashford, who's one type, or Jack Grealish, who's another type, or Jadon Sancho, who's another type as well. That position is fully stocked, but Barnes is part of that conversation on merit, and it's his goal scoring that really takes the attention. You know, he's done it whenever he's played, especially for Leicester this season, where he's got 9 goals in the Premier League this season. So you'd expect him to get well into double figures. And given that this is just his second campaign of being, genuinely a first choice forward player for a Leicester team who are still pretty reliant on Jamie Vardy for goals, you'd think that's going to improve. And as we often talk about on 5x5, he is pure PP. I mean, that's his role on the football pitch, is to get on the ball and affect games. He's there to score goals. He's there to assist. And if he doesn't earn PP, then his status within football will drop very, very quickly because, frankly, he doesn't really offer much else. He's not somebody who will grab the ball from deep areas and continually kind of make territories and stuff. He's not somebody who necessarily retains possession particularly well. If you look at his passing stats compared to those I mentioned earlier, they're pretty low. He's direct, he's effective, and he's very, very brave on the ball. And he's got the quality in the final third to go with it as well. So the reason why I think it's interesting comparing him to Musiala is because you'd think he is going to have to develop another leap in order to get there. And Ali, I know you're a big fan of his, so my question to you is, he's 23 years old now. Where does Harvey Barnes have to be in 2 years' time in order to justify that pretty lofty price tag for a guy who is getting to that cusp now where can we still call him a young player?
I definitely agree that the price, for me, even as someone who loves him and like you, it feels just a tiny bit too high, right, to really want to get involved. Here's what I think is the best case scenario for Barnes, okay? And it's not beyond the realms of possibility either at all, I don't think. Firstly, Leicester are not quite nailed on. We'd never say that in the Premier League. And from this point last year, as we know, they dropped off hugely. But there was a pandemic that stopped football for 3 months in between. They are in very good nick in terms of making the Champions League next year, in terms of therefore being in the Champions League group stages. They won't need to qualify. Harvey Barnes, who is now an established first-team player for this Leicester side, you'd think will have, barring injury, 6 shots at the big PP next year. And that's pretty exciting. And maybe Leicester sell a player or two this summer, as they tend to have to do. But it's hard to imagine them not being a very impressive side next year, as long as their development continues in its current arc, as long as Brendan Rodgers stays at the club and doesn't get whisked away by somewhere else. I'm confident that Barnes wouldn't be the one to leave this summer. I don't think he's the next cab off the rank. So I'd be excited about his potential to play Champions League football and get Champions League PP next year. And then potentially after that, if his development continues, and as you say, he probably would need to take one more leap, then I'm looking at Liverpool, to be honest. In a 5-yard scout report, we say one of the questions that we ask is team that he'd be perfect for. And I think Liverpool is the obvious one for me in English football anyway. Certainly not least because they have a front three that's very established, but I think everyone accepts will need to be refreshed over the next few years. But also, my feeling, George, and it might be a bit of a gut feeling, I'd be interested to know what the listeners, the viewers think here, is that we often talk about players who play from wide positions, who are great passers, who are great dribblers. I can't think of as many elite goal scorers from those wide positions as creative players, really nice, tidy, technical players who can play a lovely through ball. And I think that's where Barnes has a big advantage, because actually scoring goals consistently and being a direct goal threat menace like he is, I think that's probably more valuable potentially than being a really good technical creative player from those wide areas. And that's why I think that he has got a pretty good chance of one of the very top teams taking a punt on him. If I'm right, and there are a lot of technical creative types out there, then in a 4-3-3, for example, like he more or less plays in for Leicester, like Liverpool play in, like a lot of the top teams play, there's absolutely space for one of your wide players to be pure goals and let the player on the other side, potentially one of the central midfielders, take the creative load. So I'm pretty positive about the best case scenario for Barnes being Champions League PP for Leicester next season. Let's say 6 bites at the cherry. They could reach the knockout stages, of course, and then maybe a big move on the horizon. But
who would you rather buy out of the 2 players
probably
we just
not
discussed
at this stage.
At the prices?
I'd probably rather buy Barnes at the prices. Just because it's tough, isn't it? I like to think of myself as very patient 5 yards players. I've got a lot of players in my squad that I know I have to be patient with, that I know I'm not going to reap the rewards that I think are coming for 5 years or so. I guess where Barnes has the edge over Musiala is that shorter term PP, probably. Now, I might be a bit low on Musiala's chances of breaking into Bayern's first team. Maybe I'm missing something here. But, I'm confident Leicester will make the Champions League. They play in the Premier League, which is the highest PP league. As you said, his goal-scoring numbers are magnificent. I think only 6 players in the Premier League have scored more non-penalty goals than him. So, if last season was a breakthrough season, he has definitely taken a leap this year, and who knows what could happen next. But it's definitely very exciting. We've got another player to talk about that we like a lot, specifically that we like watching a lot, and I'm going to need your help discussing sort of the 5Y aspects of it. It's Ilias Chair of QPR. Now, he's a player going up on 5 yards this week, along with a number of other players. I'll talk you through some of the highlights. You've got Tom Davies of Everton, still somehow an England under-21 player, although not for much longer, and seemingly in very good form for Everton, it should be said. You've got one from each of the old firm. You've got Borna Barisic of Rangers and David Turnbull of Celtic going up on 5 yards. A number of EFL players, which we love to see. Hayden Roberts on loan from Brighton at Rochdale. Corley Woodrow of Barnsley, I know, is a favourite of yours as well. George Bradley Dack of Blackburn Rovers. You've got a Leeds player called Crescencio Somerville, a young United player called Arnau Puigmal, who I know nothing about, a handful of others as well. But I want to talk about Ilias Chair because the EFL is obviously our area of expertise, or so we'd like to think. He's going to go up on 5Y at around 11 or 12
They can
million.
listen to
the
us
scouts
before
are
they
just
do
making their last tweaks before he gets uploaded. Yeah, I'm interested. I'm more interested in Ilias Chair's next few years than I am necessarily rushing to buy into him as soon as he goes on 5 yards on Friday, I think. I love watching him because he is unique in the sense that he is 5'2". He stands out when you watch QPR games. Firstly, because he's exceptionally small. You have to be honest. If that's the first time you've seen him play, it's the first thing you notice. But quite quickly after that, you notice that technically he's got brilliant tight control. He's evidently got a very low centre of gravity, and that helps him to buzz around the pitch in quite an aesthetically pleasing manner. If you've covered him for a few years, you know that he had a loan spell in Stevenage in League Two when he was 19, and no one really knew about this kid, where he scored 5 goals from about 35 yards, and it was just like, it was ridiculous what he was doing. It was more like a basketball player than a football player. He was getting the ball, beating a man, and scoring from 25 yards. Now, interestingly, at QPR, although he has got 5 or so goals this season, his goal scoring numbers haven't been that impressive, and his shooting from distance may be counteracted by an improvement in the quality of goalkeepers that he's shooting at. But it's the creative burden that he has for QPR. And I think it's really interesting when trying to look a bit deeper into creative numbers, how much this is an issue. George, he's created the 6th most chances in the Championship this season. But if you take out set pieces, he is massively down there. So he has only, out of his, I think, 55 chances created, only a third of them have been from open play, 2/3 from set pieces. And you and I know that is a bit of a red flag, right? Now, if I'm making excuses for Chair, I would say that he hasn't, until Charlie Austin arrived in January, had the sort of strikers that get themselves on the end of a lot of good chances. And so maybe that is an excuse being made for him. Also, he really did have, he was playing for a bottom half team without many other creators in there, and had a lot of burden on him. So if I'm honest, those numbers take me down a notch when I'm thinking of Chair, and specifically when I'm projecting on him at the next level. There's a big part of me that thought, or that thinks, if he moved to Norwich City after Emi Buendia left, this might not quite work because they'll be in the Premier League, and that is a big step up. But let's say Buendia had left in January and they'd bought Chair. I think he'd be much more comfortable in that Norwich side. I think playing with better players in a more balanced system, with other players to take the creative burden, would bring the best out of him. And I could see him really adding to his goal threat, playing for a team that has quite so much possession on the edge of the box. But I suppose, George, it's just the big one for EFL players on 5 yards is, although there is PP in the Champions League, in the Championship, you really need them to move to the Premier League at some point and stay there and be the sort of player to get PP. Do we think realistically Chair is that player?
I don't think so. And I think Ilias Chair is a really interesting person to take as kind of a case study, because 5 yards isn't as easy as just choosing players that you rate and who you enjoy watching and then buying them. Because I love Ilias Chair. I love watching him play football. He is often the shining light when you see QPR. He is the kind of player that puts a smile on your face when you see his willingness to be creative and his ability to do so in the final third, and kind of the unpredictability of his footballing style as well. But, and it's a big but, you'd need him to leave. You'd need him to leave QPR, and last month he signed a new long-term contract at the club. Now, these contracts are mainly there in order to protect assets. All it probably means is that whoever comes in for Ilias Chair would have to pay a fair amount of money. But if you think back to Ebere Eze leaving last summer and where he's gone to Palace, a side who, you know, aren't going to be in a relegation scrap this season, but aren't by any stretch one of the better teams in the Premier League. I don't see a Premier League side taking a punt on Chair. I have a feeling if he was to get a top tier move, it might be abroad, possibly. You'd think his agent would probably look for that kind of a move, especially because of his style of play, maybe suiting a more continental style, I guess. And if he does take QPR for the foreseeable, I can only see that price going down until there's rumours of a move. So, yeah, I love him. I think he's great. I think you'd have to get a sniff of there being a move in order to make this value at the £11-12 million mark.
I mean, yeah, I'm really torn on this because I do play 5 yards with a portion of sentiment, and I make no excuses for it. There's so many different ways to play the game, basically, and there are people like Felix Pate, who is heavily involved as a scout, recommending players using a model that he has built, which is unbelievably impressive, and you should definitely go and check out his reports, check out his podcast, listen to him talk through it, because it's fascinating for me to see what his model thinks about players on 5 yards. Yeah. And I dare say in the long term, that's probably a good way of going about things. But yeah, I mean, I've got a chunk of sentiment, maybe 25% of my strategy. And that could be my fatal flaw in the end, George. Who knows? I'm not sure I'm going to be getting involved with Big Ilias at 11 or 12 million. But I can't make any promises because it's not that expensive, that. And there are a lot of players who play a similar position to him who are 5, 6, 7, 8 million pounds more expensive on 5 yards. And I dare say there might be some QPR fans who think they've got a bit more of a gem than we might think and can see an easier pathway for him. But that's the beauty of the game. I'm just chuffed that he's up on the platform. I want to see people writing scout reports, because it's not just about buying and selling players. It's about in-depth, detailed scout reports, if you want to write those, or just quick ones. Let us know what you think their ratings are, current rating, potential ability, where you think they can get to, strengths and weaknesses. The scouting side of 5 yards has really kicked off in the last month or so with our Scout of the Month competition. There'll be a new competition for March, and the prizes are going to be excellent. So please do sign up to 5 yards if you haven't already. Even if you don't want to buy and sell into players, get involved as a scout. Build your profile and put your opinions and your knowledge of players down on paper where you can refer back to it, see which ones you got right, see which ones you got wrong. As ever, we just thank you for tuning in and listening to this week's 5Y5. We love taking 5 players, taking a special guest and talking all things 5Y. We've got a really special show lined up for you next week. So make sure you're across all the 5 Yard social channels, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, for all the details there. Bit of a collaboration on the cards, I think you'll find. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for watching. We'll talk again next week.